To a special interview from Swing and a Miss with Tigers and Red Wings host and reporter Logan Reever. Logan, welcome to the show and thank you for your time today.
Appreciate you guys having me, man. It's good to see you guys.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you're heading back to spring training today, so we can jump right into it so we don't make you miss your flight or anything like that. And it's only fitting that our resident Tigers fan, Josh, gets to ask you the first question.
Yeah. So speaking of spring training, what are the young players that have kind of caught your eye so far with how spring training is going? Obviously, we know about Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal and, how they've been doing. But outside of those two, who's kind of caught your eye as potential guys that we might see up in the big leagues sooner rather than later?
No, I was going to say I don't want to steal your answers specifically with that, but spending some time with Kevin specifically, like this guy's the real deal. And I think a lot of people have been excited for him for a minute and what he brings to the table, but also demeanor wise, because that was the first time I met him down in spring training, and demeanor wise, like he very much has it where it's just so even keel, kind of professional about it that you forget how young this guy, we talk about Max as well too. Like they're so wise beyond their years, which I don't think a lot of people would gather from some of these, prospects from being in the spot. And they've had such a spotlight on them for years now on top of it, let alone what they're bringing to the table in this spring or the last ones, and just how much, honestly, for the lack of a better word, pressure that goes with it too. So the first one that comes to mind is Kevin for sure, because now he's been also producing, and we'll probably see him at some point sooner rather than later over the course of this year. It'll be interesting to see what the timeline of all of that is, but I'd say Scott Harris has done a really good job of kind of navigating how to keep some of these young guys in the pipeline ready to go while also having, let's try to win now mentality on top of it too. So that's a tough balance to strike the both of those pretty evenly, especially with how the fan base wants them to go for it, but to kind of keep that level head of being like, hey, we also got some guys that are going to make an immediate impact and then a long-term impact. It's tough in the sport. You see a lot of teams trying to go forward immediately. But to have patience and also to stick it out can sometimes be a double-edged sword. And I think they've been navigating it nicely thanks to guys like that.
Yeah, that's great. I know all of us Detroit fans are on pins and needles waiting for Kevin to come up. So, that's obviously the big story for it. So it's good to hear that, he's got his mind together and ready to go when the call does come.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Logan, as a show, we've already done our predictions for the Tigers division, and overwhelmingly, we all believe the Tigers are going to win this division. And I think pretty much any prognosticator out there would agree. However, who do you see challenging them in 2026, if anybody, in the division?
The division, it's hard to not, especially with how last season played out, it's hard to not say the Guardians, just because you would think that brand of baseball was down and out, right? Based on how the first number of months of the year went last year. And then they just get on this little run and trend, and they just kind of almost dink and dunk their way into these runs. And I am a believer that no matter how far baseball goes analytically, those ways to win will always be intrinsically there. And so naturally, you're going to be in the conversation until the end. And then you see a situation like that last year where you have a dip at the wrong time, and then a team finds an opening to do exactly that. And I think when a team hangs around like that just enough, they're always going to be scary. And then, of course, it's a team that now has experience in those situations, in those spots. And I think that's something that the rest of the division can't really say that they have at this point. Like the Tigers are at the level right now where I think 2 years ago, it would have been crazy for people to think this, but they have that experience. They have relative championship experience because they've been in all of these big games. And the Guardians have been in a pretty similar boat where they've been in just as many big games over the course of the years, at least their core group of guys. And they also just have a lot of players who are just good in their system, know exactly what their role is, and they just grind it out, which over the course of 162, you're looking for teams that are going to grind it out, and they do a really good job of it. So it's definitely not the sexy answer by any means because of the type of baseball that they play, but I have a funny feeling that they're going to be in the conversation relatively until the end.
That's what
It's
Tyler
interesting.
and I always say about the Cleveland Black Magic that they have there. They just always find a way to be pesky and around.
Yep, everyone knows those little voodoo, those voodoo dolls that they somehow pick up. They find a way to
Right.
pick them
Crazy.
until the end.
So what lessons do you think the Tigers could have learned from last year, where they looked like the best team in baseball, they had the best record, they were going to march right into the playoffs, and then they crumbled, and then they were able to rebound and have a nice little playoff run. So they have this young core. What kind of lessons do you think they can carry from last year into this year with that?
That's a good one. I would say, and it's funny because you would think based on last year, and like you go through especially with how close the Mariners were to giving the Blue Jays a run, and then how close the Blue Jays were to giving the Dodgers a run. The Tigers were close to giving the Mariners a run. So it's like everything was just like truly everybody was right there. And I think the team has that mindset as well too. And so it doesn't matter how you got there, it's just the fact that you are there. And I think the team adopted that at a certain point. But their confidence, like even looking at them now, whenever talking to guys in spring training, there still is an air of confidence there. And you would think for a team that saw that dip, that might not be the case even a little bit. And I think because they've now been in those spots, those high measure, intense situations like it was in Seattle in that final game, that's going to teach a lot for the guys, specifically the young bats in these games. Like I know they got massive contributions from guys like Kerry Carpenter, Javi Baez, guys who stepped up in these spots. But it's like anything in life. When you're in a situation, going to inherently be better at it the next time that it rolls around. And truly, we forget for this group how young they are. And because they have the expectations that it almost comes off like a more experienced veteran group that is in this window. But you have to remind yourself how young this team is at this moment. And so I think for them, it's going to be sticking with the process is probably one way to put it, but just putting yourself back in the situation. Like AJ Hinch always referenced that, they were very much the team who had won all of those games. It wasn't necessarily their dip. And so sometimes over the course of, and you're going to get that from any team, like the Dodgers saw massive struggles over the course of a stretch during last year too. It just so happened to come at a different time. The Tigers one just came at the most inconvenient time possible in baseball. And so it was kind of just a perfect storm of all of those things. And watch, there'll probably be a point of, this year when they have a similar dip. You hope it's not at that exact time again, because that'd be, nobody wants that sort of energy going into the playoff scenario, but they'll probably be better for it, to be honest with you, because now when that dip does inevitably happen, it's like, okay, we've been here. How can we navigate this to get back to the spot and overcome it where we are in that last game, just a run away essentially from advancing to a championship series too.
Yeah.
Hard to be great for 162 straight games.
Yeah, I think that's what makes
it's
baseball
impossible.
great.
Literally impossible. Yeah.
So Logan, you grew up in
Absolutely.
Jupiter, Florida, which is about a 3-hour drive from Lakeland, I think. So growing up in that area, did you ever go to spring training where the Tigers are in Lakeland?
No, so I grew up in like West Palm Beach area, Jupiter specifically. So actually my first job was at where the Marlins and Cardinals do their spring training, where I was a water boy. So I went to a lot of those games specifically, which that's one of the stadiums that has stayed the same. Like they added the complex in West Palm where the Astros and Nationals do it now. And that's super nice. That was a lot different there. I had actually never been to the Lakeland one before this past spring training, because this will be my first start to the year with the Tigers. And being down there, it's amazing how the whole town is essentially built around it. And even staying in the hotel, like the amount of people who you're seeing every day for a month at the continental breakfast, getting the same thing, and the dedication from people is it's unlike anything that I've seen before, and it's just crazy. I think when you have that level of dedication for people, and you have to keep in mind, this team was also not fully, it's not like the stars were all there when they were there, like between, the UBC and them traveling to the Dominican as well, like, they were getting a lot of the guys that, and I know it's part of spring training as well too, but you're getting a lot of the guys that aren't the more known names, and they're still showing out the same way every single day, again, for a month straight, which is true. It's unlike anything that I've seen in terms of fan bases wise before. I know other teams probably have it to an extent, but they love their Tigers, man. They love the guys that might not be on the roster. They love their stars. It does not matter whatsoever. So they, similar to the players, they're also grinding it out to the same severity. So it's a sight to see. It's spring training is a special time with it too. I don't think I've gotten as much of appreciation for it as I did when I was a kid for what I have for it now, because you can see how it really impacts people's lives, their social lives on top of it too, and just how much they love being around it. Simply being in the arena is a huge part of it for people too.
Very cool.
So the 999 challenge, it kind of swept the internet last year, and now teams are starting to embrace it. They just came out with all the food items this past week, each stadium, and a lot of them are doing their own 999 packages. Have you done the 999 challenge?
I actually have, and I did it.
Oh.
Funny enough, at that minor league ballpark that I talked about.
Okay.
For working in, that was a weird full circle moment. It's because I was back with my high school friends, which is never a good idea to do, to be back with your high school friends. And they had the wonderful idea, because it was Dollar Dog Night, to go over to the minor league park that a couple of us used to work in at that. And for some reason, I volunteered. I don't know why. I think it was just because I don't see those guys often, so I probably wasn't in a right state of mind whatsoever. And the game starts. We start getting some offense early, which is huge, because you got to slow things down. Because if you start getting outs immediately, you got to start drinking the beer a little faster, the hot dogs a little faster. You need a certain type of game if you're going to have success during a 999 challenge. But I got to, and this is going to be a little hard for people to believe, I got to 999. Well, I should say 995, because there was such a level of offense that I get the 9 beers down and the 9 hot dogs, and it was the bottom of the 5th inning. So,
wow.
I don't know if that should scare your listeners or if they should be impressed by it, but I ended up, I think I ended up 10-7, and then I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
That's impressive.
Oh, so you went extra innings on it.
Get some insurance runs at the end and see where it led. But the next 2 days I did for no reason. Nobody asked me to. I was just trying to run up the score a little bit. I was feeling it for probably 2 or 3 days after. So I would suggest, I don't know if I would recommend it to anybody, to say the least.
Well, from what I've seen, the ones that the teams are putting out, the hot dogs are more like mini size, and the beers are maybe half pours. I know there's like laws on how much beer they can give you anyway, so that's probably part of it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
keep that. Don't make the mini beer, because people's
maybe I'll try one of those. We'll see. Yeah, we'll start small and work our way up. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can go right into like you did.
Some load management, and then work your way in. Yeah, just do a bullpen session, work your way in, eventually build up to being maybe 100 pitches over the course of a year.
Especially with the pitch clock now. The games are so quick; they're less than 3 hours. So you started this 5 years ago, and games are going 3.5, 4 hours. You have a better shot. Now it's probably a struggle with the pitch clock.
Yeah.
Now you get your Joey Chestnut training in before trying to tackle it.
Exactly.
Yeah. No doubt.
So Logan, what's the hardest part about your job with the Tigers that you didn't expect until you got the job?
The hardest part?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think, at least for me, because I spent 8 years in local news before this, and so you get a sense of, you get these like small gaps of time, like you're doing 3 or 4 minute sportscasts in a show. And for me, I think the biggest change is when you're doing live stuff in game. When I was in local news, you could prepare for it a lot. Like hours essentially to prepare for the show. Or if some, breaking news happens, obviously it's quicker than that. But a lot of what we do right now is just on the fly. Like, you can have a great example, and it happens on the Red Wings side too, is that you can have all of the answers prepared for a game because of how it looks for, 2.5 periods, or in baseball's case, 8 innings. And then just one fluky random thing happens that changes everything, and you have to completely adapt on the fly. Like, if you have 4 or 5 questions that you're like, all right, I want to hit these with, coming up. I think I have an idea of who I want to interview, what questions I want to ask, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then something happens and it completely blows it out of the water. And it's like, all right, crap. Now I have to reassess everything that goes along with this. But in a lot of ways, it kind of tests, how good you are at the job. Because it's not, anybody can be pretty decent when everything is perfectly curated, lined up, and measured in that way. But it's how you adapt in certain situations. And I think that's also what makes it great, though, too. It's, if you are going into a game, let's say down 3 runs in the 9th, and your team ends up winning it, like, you want to be in those situations where, like, okay, what in the world, how am I going to possibly articulate this question or this moment for that to back up whatever this amazing, like, what does it do it justice with this amazing situation? Because that's what people at home are kind of looking for, right? Is that they're trying to give words or meaning to what they just saw. They just know they feel overwhelmed with emotion or whatnot, but it's so that's probably been the hardest, but also the coolest thing to navigate is how to do that for people. Because, like I talked about before, there's so much dedication and passion with this fan base. And I remember being that kid growing up specifically too, that was, watching in front of the TV and almost hanging on every single word that these broadcasters are talking about. And so now you just try to do that because realize how important it is for people in that spot. And then also kids growing up in that situation too, because it means more to them than really anybody else. I still think about how borderline psychotic it was for me, and that's what got me into it, to this in the first place. So just trying to do it justice for people, man. That's been the biggest calling card of this.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I got one more from my side, at least. So you kind of touched on it a little bit with my first question when you were talking about, the balance of bringing a guy up to development in the minors and stuff. So from what you've seen, how much do, like, what we see at the major league level as fans, how much does that reflect what's actually being emphasized behind the scenes? Because, like, a lot of times teams will be a little bit more coded in what they say, and they're working on a lot of things behind the scenes that they won't go out and just say on TV or on interviews or anything. So, like, how much of that balance is, true to what the fans see to what kind of stuff they're actually looking at behind the scenes?
Oh, there's a lot more that they, there's certain subtleties and things that they specifically in with somebody or trying to adjust somebody's swing or bat. Like, there's so much that goes into this all, and it's a very small lens. Like, that's why I think when people sometimes get, like, the coach speak of it all, it's like they can you start to understand over the course of time why that is, and sometimes it's protecting guys, or sometimes it's emphasizing guys. There's a lot more that goes into it, and that's, I would say, it's like a tip of the iceberg situation with how much that actual media, and especially at spring training, is such a huge element for people, because that's the most behind closed doors, and also the definition of development that people are like, that's their first introduction to it. Like, that is the ground where people are almost being painted canvas wise for the longest period of time, because they have had such a long layoff, and they're just trying to get back in the mix with it too. This really month and this time before opening day is the most when guys are able to be molded, especially the younger guys that go with it too. Like,
Sure.
Max was talking about how important just these springs have been for him in learning. He's such a great example of his relationships with some of these players and the stars of the team. Like, it is so strong, and he fits in so well personality wise with all of these guys. And part of it's from being around, and then part of it is from taking the coaching on top of it too. So they are working through infinite things, I promise you. So, and that's part of why they don't tell us, because that's
For sure.
state secrets at a certain point.
For sure. That's what I always try to tell like people who talk to me about baseball and aren't like fully into the game like I am, that spring training isn't even necessarily like results based so much as they're looking to see how these different tweaks to like their swings and their pitch mix and all that is looking. So don't necessarily just look at the stats to determine, if a guy's having a good spring, that the team is looking at 3 million things and the result might not be the most important thing, but all the process in the meantime.
A guy can get rocked in a start and he's getting a different spin rate on one of his pitches, and that can be a win within itself. Like there's so much that goes into every single detail that's down there. So yeah, and that's what spring is for, quite literally. So you can't read into all of these things to a degree.
For sure.
Last question for me, Logan. Best ballpark or favorite ballpark other than Comerica to work in?
Oh, that's a good. I'd have a better answer for you after the year, because I was only really on with the Tigers travel wise for about a month and a half going into last year. So I would say probably off of the ones that I was in last year, Kansas City has a very slept on ballpark. I will say it's a beautiful one. So I'm going to go with them. I've heard amazing things about Pittsburgh. San Francisco's at that too. So a couple of those looking forward to down the line. But I'll give you the answer probably nobody has before. I'll go Kansas City. How about that?
We actually all have been there together.
Just to stir the pot a little bit. There you go. Yeah,
I agree with you. It's a great ballpark.
All right. Yeah, we want to be respectful of your time. We know you have a big day ahead of you, so we'll go ahead and let you go and let you get to let you get back to what you do best.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Logan. Have a great season.
Thanks, Logan.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys.